Today we're going to talk about the spinal cord. And if you look at this picture, this is a cross section of the spinal cord here. So if I was in this picture here, my body would be coming out this way. This is the posterior, and this is the anterior. Okay, so I would be kind of face down here, and the spinal cord would be coming up through me this way. And so we just take a chop through that. These here are parts of the nerves that are leading into and away from the spinal cord, bringing information in and away from the spinal cord. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the parts of this picture, as well as some of the specialized nerves or neurons that flow through here. So first of all, gray and white matter. Gray matter is, remember, made up of neuron cell bodies and dendrites, and the white matter is more myelinated axons. So in the brain, the orientation of those parts are the gray matter is more on the outside in the cortex, and then the white matter is more internally. The spinal cord, that's kind of switched around. The gray matter is located internally, kind of forming this butterfly shape looking structure. And the white matter is outside here. Okay, we have in the middle here a tube which contains cerebral spinal fluid called the central canal. There, and remember the CSF, the cerebral spinal fluid, circulates through that, okay, from internally in the brain, and it comes straight down the spinal cord. All right, let's see how information comes into and passes through the spinal cord. So let's begin here with a sensory neuron. Now, you have to pick up information from the environment through your sense organs, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, all over your body, your skin. All right, so information comes into the spinal cord through what's called a sensory neuron. And this sensory neuron passes through this portion here. Now, this area here that brings information in is called the posterior root, sometimes called the dorsal root, because it's along the back. Okay, so this is the posterior root. This here is the anterior root, sometimes called the ventral root. All right, and so the sensory neuron brings information through the dorsal root. And here, see how it's a little swollen here? It's larger there. This structure here is called the posterior root ganglion. Now, a ganglion is an area where there's a collection of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. So outside the brain and spinal cord, if you have a collection of these cell bodies, it's called a ganglion. Inside the central nervous system, they're called nuclei, a collection of cell bodies. All right, so here we have our sensory neuron here. And with its little cell body sitting here in the ganglion. Now, inside the central nervous system, or inside the spinal cord, sometimes the sensory neuron will hook up with another neuron called an interneuron. Inter means between, neuron means neuron, between the neurons. All right, interneurons are completely within the spinal cord. All right, and then it hooks up with a motor neuron, which is going to pass out the anterior root like this. All right, so now if we take a look at how information passes, information will come in to the central nervous system through a sensory neuron, through the posterior root. It will connect or hook up maybe with an interneuron. Sometimes you don't have interneurons and they just go straight from a sensory to a motor. But then an interneuron here, and then it hooks up to a motor neuron, which will bring information out to an effector, which is a gland or a muscle. So you know, you step on a tack, okay, or touch a hot stove. Information from those neurons, okay, those nerve endings pick up that heat or that pain, and it will send information very quickly along an action potential. Here, hook up with the interneuron, and then out the motor neuron, which will go to your muscles in your hand or your leg, and then you'll either pull back your hand or lift up your leg in response. And that's, you know, how quickly does that happen? It happens really, really rapidly. So it's kind of an amazing thing that information can pass so quickly along that. The last thing is, I'm going to do it over here, is we have this and this structure where the roots come together and where the motor and the sensory neurons pass through. These are called the spinal nerves. The spinal nerves, we have, remember, we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves that exit through the little openings on the side called intervertebral foramen. Okay, and so the spinal cord, we have those spaces that allow information to enter and exit. There are 8 pairs of cervical spinal nerves. There are 12 pairs of thoracic. There are 5 pairs of lumbar spinal nerves. And there are 5 pairs of sacral spinal nerves. And there's 1 pair of coccygeal spinal nerve. All right, so hopefully that adds up to 31. All right, I hope I didn't forget anything, and I hope that was helpful.